A house divided against itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln. For centuries, walls have divided us. From medieval city walls to Hadrian's Wall to the Great Wall of China, they cover the world. But throughout history, they have been built with one purpose in mind, and that is to keep people out. We learn about them in our history books. We learn how the Great Wall of China kept the Manchurians at bay. Yet the Berlin Wall is different from every other permanent wall built both before it and after it, because it was built with the express purpose of keeping people in. It is a painful irony to realize that in our enlightened era, man has acted barbarically by constructing a de facto prison, constraining hundreds of thousands who are perpetrators of no crime. Their only sin was that of being a citizen of East Berlin. Now, I was not alive during the time that the wall stood. I never lived next to it. Therefore, I don't feel I'm truly qualified to speak on this subject and give you some profound sentiment or interpretation. So, my one aim this evening is to eulogize a couple forgotten and even unknown victims of the wall who most certainly have the authority to speak on it much better than myself. And after I speak about them, I will show you exactly what is happening because the world is forgetting their story. One of the first victims of the wall was a man by the name of Peter Fechter, who was shot and left for dead on August 17, 1962. A simple man, a construction worker, frustrated with a life held back by the communist system, he decided to flee one day. As he ran toward the wall, he came under heavy fire from the guards. He was hit in the back and sustained massive injuries. Still alive, he laid on the ground for 50 minutes, crying and pleading for help from anyone. West German authorities could not reach him, but East German border guards stood and watched one of their countrymen die a slow and painful death, apparently unable to act without the authorization from the higher-ups. And when said higher-ups arrived, it was too late, because Peter was pronounced dead upon his arrival at a hospital. But Peter died because he tried to escape. Even more alarming are the deaths of those who had no intention of crossing the border. And of the 30 confirmed deaths that fall into this category during the life of the wall, the most disturbing are the deaths of children. Children like Giuseppe Savoca, a 6-year-old son of Italian immigrants to West Berlin. He fell into the waters of the Spree River that helped to divide the city along with the wall. The border guards on the eastern side saw the accident and reported it, but note that they didn't take any immediate action, even though they were close enough to see the incident happen. Next, a boat belonging to East German border troops arrived at the site, but continued on their way, doing nothing. Only after receiving orders did they attempt to rescue Giuseppe, but by that time it was, just like with Peter, too late. Like I mentioned, I never experienced life with the wall, nor do I know any victims or refugees of it. But I am reminded every day of the value of my freedom because my family experienced life with the Iron Curtain. When the Berlin Wall fell, it symbolized the fall of communism throughout the former USSR, and therefore it is extremely personal for me. My family escaped from Hungary, from under that Iron Curtain in the aftermath of the Revolution of 1956. My Aunt Kati was a single mother of 2 who worked for the Hungarian National Academy of Sciences in the organic chemistry department. Her boss was a prominent chemist, and he was allowed a passport, which was an unbelievably rare commodity during Soviet control. And he decided that the entire department should escape. After all, they were educated, and they had a trade that would allow them success in the free world. He took all of the men on his team but one to Switzerland. The man who remained had no family, so he served as an escort for the women and the families of the department. But yet my aunt was the key player in the actual escape. The groups of women and children of which she was a part couldn't crawl on all 4s across the border. So my aunt bribed a communist border guard who thankfully was sympathetic. Not only did she convince him to look the other way, but also he guided the group through the minefields that littered the forest on the Austrian border. Kati even said that the younger children in the group literally had to be drugged so that they wouldn't make noise in that forest. From the crossing into Austria, they made their way through halfway houses until finally obtaining sponsorships and settling in America. Though I couldn't see their reactions when the wall that symbolized the border that they crossed finally fell, I watched their reactions as they watched President Reagan's funeral on television. I will never forget how the tears streamed down my father's face. I will also never forget the night that I spent learning about the wall only a few days before. I had always known what the wall was, but never fully realized how important it was until President Reagan died. I visited the Reagan Library in Simi Valley and stood in line with my friends and family literally through the night to pay my respects to him when he was lying in state. I don't know if it was the somber silence of the actual room that I waited in around the clock, or if it was the rising sun as it was eclipsed by the piece of the wall. But by dawn, I learned what freedom meant to me. Freedom doesn't just mean liberty. It means the freedom to act on the behalf of others in need. Reagan and the presidents before him did exactly this when they traveled to Berlin. When Kennedy spoke to West Berlin to show the solidarity of the United States, and when President Reagan implored to Gorbachev, open this gate, tear down this wall, their actions were the product of freedom, realized to its fullest extent. Freedom is what allowed them to speak without reserve, and eventually, to change the world. These changes brought about by the wall's demolition and the sacrifices of those who died at the wall are great, but they are completely inconsequential if they are not remembered and taught. It took great men to fell the wall. Recall that Gorbachev essentially wrote himself out of a job when he tore it down and continued to dismantle the Soviet Union. As the leader of the Union and not of an individual state, he was left with no authority when he disbanded it. This self-sacrifice awarded him the honor of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990. But events like that were once at the center of the world stage, are now nowhere on it. The next generation, of which I'm a member, knows little to nothing about the wall or its fall. We slip through a precarious and dangerous gap. We are too young to remember life with the wall. Yet we have already passed through elementary schools and secondary schools and their history classes. And the events of 1989 barely made it into our books. Even so, note the marvel of the fly-by school year. I remember several occasions on which I didn't learn anything past World War II because, whoops, it's the end of the school year, and we must have spent too long talking about the Pilgrims back in September. And a few examples of the ignorance that I've heard even on my own college campus really frighten me. When I took a tour, as the guide approached our section of the Berlin Wall, a young girl turned toward her mother and said, "Mom, what's the Berlin Wall?" Now, I sincerely hope that was a younger sister of whoever was applying to the school. But even after I attended here, I literally heard one day walking to class, I mean, who would graffiti on the Berlin Wall? It's like a piece of history. You can't just, do that. Now, I don't know which of those is worse, but I'll let you be the judge of that. These examples demonstrate that many young people don't know or understand the trials so close to their lifetimes. When people are not students of history, and when they forget, they run the risk of letting it repeat itself. We are in danger of this happening because the world is forgetting. But every one of you in this room tonight knows the history. But you now have a greater responsibility, the responsibility to inform those who do not know. Go home tonight and talk to your roommates. Talk to your children, your friends, your grandchildren, and tell them the story of the wall and of what freedom means to you. Tell them to cherish it and to fight to keep it alive for as long as they live. Do not let the lives lost at the wall be lost in vain. That chance actually still exists if we don't keep the torch of freedom burning brightly. This is our charge and our duty. We can never again allow our world to slip into darkness and to build prisons for the innocent. As we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, let us remember that we have not yet secured its place in history. We must fight to keep the freedom and the legacy of the wall and its fall alive for every future citizen of our world. Thank you.